Hello and welcome back to Schlyde into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schlyde, aka Schlyde, and normally on the show we talk about college sports, rules and regulations, and their trickle-down effect throughout all of college sports, and we also talk about relevant outcomes, whether it be in college sports or professional sports. This summer we've been focused on professional sports because, well, summer, there's a big hiatus from college sports, except for the rules and regulations. That's why we tend to talk about that year round. But anyways, with that being said, we do have some very interesting stories on the docket, to say the least. We've got some preseason rankings. The coaches poll got released. Then a couple days later, some new information about eligibility came to light regarding the high school class of 2022. I'm also going to talk about my preseason rankings. I finally have those put together, and it's very different from the coaches poll. There's 4 teams that are on mine that are not on the coaches poll, and honestly, like, my rankings also kind of serve as a projection, at least when it comes to preseason rankings. It's based on what teams did last season, how they typically play year over year with the coach that they currently have. With new coaches, I try to base their ranking on what they were able to do in the transfer portal, what they were able to do in high school recruiting rankings, and what they were able to do with their former team, and whether or not they're the new coach is an upgrade or a downgrade from, from what the team had previously. And we're also going to talk about the Bills' new stadium, the backlash behind that. There was a ton of backlash, some justified, some not necessarily as justified, but all of it is pretty justified, to be honest. I mean, you spend $2.2 billion on a stadium, the backlash is going to be there. There's going to be things that people naturally don't like. And, of course, we have to talk about the new athletic director from Purdue and a little comment that he made about Indiana when it comes to national championships and how absurd the statement was. So with that being said, we're going to first talk about the story with the Purdue athletic director. So not too long ago, sometime last week, the rival school, I mean, as you can see, just in general, or if you, I mean, some of you guys have listened to me for a whole year now. Some of you guys might be new, but I'm a big IU guy. Graduated from IU, and, I pretty much rep IU whenever I can. I almost half my wardrobe is IU clothes. So, yeah, but I try not to let that, favoritism cloud my judgment necessarily. But anyways, Purdue hired a new athletic director. His name's Tommy McClelland. He came from Rice. That's where he was previously. But in his opening press conference, he attempted to take a shot at Indiana. And what he said was interesting, to say the least. He said, "We're here to win championships. If you don't want to win championships, go to Indiana." And that went viral immediately online. And just as quickly as it went viral, according to McClelland on Pat McAfee's show on the 7th, he said as soon as it left his mouth, he regretted saying it. And, sometimes people say things to, like, that they regret. I think he was just trying to say, we're going to get Purdue to where we think that it should be. You look at some of the programs that they have, like men's basketball, for instance. They've been close recently to winning national championships. They consistently make March Madness. Some of the March Madness performances have been disappointing, to say the least. I mean, being the second team to lose to a 16 seed, obviously not good. But then, going to a national championship, going to the Elite Eight, like on a relatively consistent basis, more so the Elite Eight than anything. But That's neither here nor there. But the reason why the comment landed with such a thud, and I mean, McKellen knows this, he knows, but a couple of the reasons why it landed with the thud that it did was Indiana won the college football national championship like 7-8 months ago. It was not that far ago, or not that long ago, when Indiana won a national championship in a sport. So saying if you want to win championships, go to Purdue, don't go to Indiana, I mean, that's not exactly what he said, but that's pretty much what he was trying to say, at least in that opening statement. But it just, out of touch, I guess, is the nicest way that I can put that, to be completely honest here, but that's just me. The other reason why this landed with the thud that it did is because Purdue only has 3 national championships across its entire athletic department, while Indiana has 24. That's 8 times the amount of national championships that Purdue has. And in some of the sports that are at IU, they have more in one singular sport than Purdue does across its whole athletic department. Men's swimming and diving has 5 national championships under its belt. Indiana basketball, 5 national championships under its belt. Indiana soccer, 8 national championships under its belt. I mean, come on. Like, it's like, no. I mean, I know 2 of the championships that Purdue has are men's golf and women's golf. And I don't even remember what the other one was, but that was the one I'm not remembering is the oldest one that they have. But either way, that was pretty much why it went stupidly viral online, because it was just that far off, if that makes sense. Like, it was just that far away from reality, if that makes complete sense. Anyways, he then goes on Pat McAfee show and basically just ends it with, we're going to build programs here that are better at winning national championships than I am at one-liners, which ironically is a one-liner in and of itself. And honestly, not terrible of a one-liner. But it definitely was, I think it definitely hit better, especially, after the previous one-liner that he tried to do. But yeah, I just thought that was a funny little story that happened. Definitely unexpected, to say the least. I mean, I did see that Purdue was looking for a new athletic director, but I didn't think he would come out swinging like this necessarily. But with football, especially, at least with Purdue, I just thought it was kind of funny, simply because Purdue has not won a game in the Big Ten Conference since 2023, when they beat us. The last time that Purdue won a conference game was against Indiana in 2023. Ever since then, Purdue has not won a in-conference game in the Big Ten in football, which is kind of insane. It really is just kind of insane. And honestly, the fact that Purdue does not have a national championship under their belt, considering the fact that they had Drew Brees at their school, who was one of the best quarterbacks, or was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and they were not able to get to a national championship, or even the Final Four, or I guess the Final Four. I think, maybe in that era it might have been 2. It might have only been 2 teams in that time, but still, either way, just hasn't happened for Purdue. But yeah, I thought that story was funny and interesting, to say the least. But yeah. All right. Moving on now to the Bills' new stadium. And part of the reason why I kind of wanted to talk about the Bills' new stadium is because, well, as you guys know, the Bears are leaving Soldier Field. As of right now, it's looking like it's going to be Hammond. A lot has indicated that. I'm 90% sure that they're going to Hammond, Indiana at this point. But with that being said, I think it should be, just something that at least the Bears can keep an eye on, if that makes sense. Just to note some concerns and things that people or that fans would want in a stadium. I mean, obviously, the Bills had the concept for the stadium already done. They knew that they did not want a dome stadium because one of the iconic parts of playing at the Bill Stadium is the snow, and it snows a lot where the Bills play, so they like to use that as an advantage. And I mean, if you have that, why would you not use that as an advantage? But that also served as one of the chief complaints online because they could have had a dome that opened. So that way they would have been able to host the Super Bowl. Because as of right now, if you want to host a Super Bowl, you have to have a dome stadium or you have to be in the South pretty much. But if you're in the North, you have to have a dome stadium. And that's more just for the halftime shows. So that way, like, they can do whatever. And also, it's supposed to serve as the Super Bowl is technically supposed to be a neutral site. For some reason, the past, 2 or 3 Super Bowls have had, people have had home field advantage, which is lucky, to say the least. I mean, Tampa Bay and LA are the first teams that, or I guess those are the 2 teams that I'm thinking of that had home field advantage for the Super Bowl. Tampa Bay had it first. And that was the year that Tom Brady and the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl. That was Tom Brady's last Super Bowl. And then LA, when they faced the Bengals in 2022, they played the Super Bowl in LA. So those are the 2 teams that had the home field advantage. And there is a chance that LA could have a home field advantage again because their team is still good. They still have Matthew Stafford. They still have their wide receiver depth. They really beefed up the defense, bringing back Aaron Darnold and trading for Myles Garrett. I mean, that defense looks exceptional. It looks very exceptional to say the least. But yeah, I think people really wanted the dome for the Bills Stadium because they do want to host a Super Bowl. And ultimately, you look at the Chiefs because the Chiefs also made a move. They're moving to from Kansas City, Missouri to Kansas City, Kansas. So they're still staying in Kansas City, but now they're going to be in Kansas, not in Missouri. So, and Kansas City is also reportedly getting a dome stadium, which kind of sucks, but as long as it's retractable, if it's a retractable dome, I think it should be fine. But ultimately, I think that's what the Bills probably should have opted for because if they still wanted the snowy weather, they could just open up the dome on AFC Championship games or non-Super Bowl games. They just open up the dome and then you can get the snow. But I guess it is what it is. Another chief complaint was visibility or I should say the lack thereof of the field and the scoreboards. So I guess this is really a 2-for-1 complaint that I'm about to bring up. So when the Bills first opened their stadium, at least to I don't remember what event it was for, but they were just letting people into the stadium. It was like the grand opening, but people were taking pictures throughout the stadium and showing some of the seats that were less than ideal, to say the least. But, not every stadium is going to be perfect, at least when it comes to seats. I will say, even though Soldier Field was one of the smaller stadiums, when I was there, it felt like it was a very immersive experience. I mean, granted, I went to watch USA versus Germany friendly game, but it was still a fun experience because there was not a lot of obstruction. The scoreboard was nice, and it felt like even though I was kind of close to the back, it still felt like I was really close to the field. And, ultimately that's kind of ideally what you want for the fans. You want a fun fan experience. And it seems like based on the pictures that I'm looking at online from various places on social media, it does not seem like there's a lot of ideal seats. Like there's deck areas that obstruct where people can watch the field. There's glass window or glass panels that people have to look through, and like on a sunny day, it would obstruct people's view. You'd have to somehow watch the game through a glare, and people that are far away from the scoreboard, like if the field is obstructed and they're far enough away from the scoreboard, they have to somehow look at a tiny scoreboard. That doesn't really seem fair, in my opinion. But there's not really a lot that the Bills can do about that, except maybe replace the scoreboards with something bigger and more ideal. But just looking at it with the placement of the scoreboard, it's not really in a good place. I mean, if anything, they could just add a tertiary scoreboard or just another scoreboard in general. But either way, it just not good. And the last complaint for the Bill Stadium that I'm going to talk about is the restrooms. So if you go to the top floor of the Bills' new stadium, it's very steep. It is a very, very steep walk. I mean, you can see just even in some of the pictures, you look at the upper part of the upper bowl, not behind the end zones, but behind where each of the teams would be sitting. So like the bleacher area. And it is incredibly steep walking up there, just looking at it, right? And you would think that there would be easy access restrooms up there for people to go use, but no, there was not. I'd say that is the most fixable problem out of the ones that I had previously mentioned. Just putting in some restrooms up on the upper floor. And I mean, kind of going back to the snowy weather, imagine it's snowy and, there's ice underneath the snow. There's always going to be ice under snow. And you're sitting in the top row of the new Highmark Stadium. And you have to walk all the way down the steep stairs to go to the restroom. Are you going to try to walk down those steep stairs, or are you going to be trying to hold it in the whole entire game because you don't want to walk down the stairs or you don't want to walk up and down the stairs more than you have to? Personally, I'm holding that in. I am not walking up and down those stairs. I'm not slipping and breaking my back. No, thank you. So I think that's something they absolutely need to fix. I think that should be priority number one, is just making sure that people have easy access to restrooms. And that's something that's difficult for stadiums because there never seems to be enough restrooms for people at the stadiums, just because, I mean, there's probably like 100 stalls or toilets that you can go use, and there's 50,000 plus people in your stadium. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard to, make it easy for people to go use the restroom, but at least proximity-wise, like, I think that could at least have been done better by the Bills. Like, that's just like the bare minimum with restrooms. It's just making sure that there's proximity for everyone to go, where it's not too far out of the way or it's not too inconvenient. You don't want to inconvenience the people that are watching your games. That's just not it's not ideally what you want to do. But yeah, the Bills, they do make, the executives did make a statement. The Bills COO, Pete Gwelly, said that the team only heard from less than 1% of PSL holders about anything sightline related, and that they were confident that fans were getting the seats they were anticipating from what was represented by the virtual venue. And honestly, I would disagree because I didn't really see any pictures online before now showing the obstructed views. Maybe they were just taking pictures from the most optimal seats, the best seats, but I personally did not see anything indicating that there was going to be obstruction. Gwelly also said, any building you walk into, there would be some obstructed seating. There are seats where we could create a different design, put in a blank area, or they give you the option to put in a seat that might be obstructed for football, but can be used for any other event like a concert. There's always partial view or limited view seats, and we think those were pretty clearly depicted in our virtual venue, which again, I disagree with that because those were not the pictures that were really posted online until now. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from with this. I mean, people like the one thing that I really saw online with the Bills Stadium was that they put in a giant broken foldable table just because that's something that Bills fans do at tailgates. They jump and break foldable tables. So, I mean, they at least included that in their stadium, but yeah, that's pretty much all that I can. That's like the one positive as of right now that I can see with the stadium. I mean, I do like that they were at least, thinking of the weather and trying to not get rid of snow games like seemingly everybody else is with the dome stadiums. They're right now the Bills Stadium is one of the few stadiums in the country in the NFL that is not a dome stadium to where they can do the snowy games. So I guess, just thinking of that aesthetic, I think that's kind of cool. But I think at the very least, just fix the restrooms, make them a little bit easier for people up at the top to get, and find some way to fix some of the obstruction. I think the glass one would be a pretty easy fix. Maybe not putting in glass or putting in a different kind of glass that doesn't glare or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I don't really know a lot about glass per se, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's a solution. Like, it's clear, right? So, I mean, you could just put a hand railing there in place of the glass or something like that. I mean, it is a glass wall. And a railing, sure, it might serve as an obstruction, but it's not going to obstruct the view as much as a glass panel with a glare. So I think that's something to keep in mind with the design. Maybe they can fix that. Who knows? But yeah, and I mean, even just looking at some of the angles, like just the way the oval is shaped in the stadium. I mean, there was definitely going to be obstruction. I mean, you can see even in some of the pictures where they are from the top, you can see how the deck areas are laid out and where some of the seats are. They could have built the deck area differently to the point where it would not have served as an obstruction, but I guess they also had concerts in mind, which sure. I guess we can go with that. Whatever. But yeah. All right. So that's pretty much my opinion on the Bills' new stadium, which not too bad, but obviously not the best. I think they could definitely do better. But yeah, Bears executives, or at least Bears stadium designers, maybe take some notes on some of the complaints that the Bills fans have on their new stadium, and try to make our stadium better. At least you want the best fan experience, especially with a new stadium. So yeah. All right, and finally we've got some patch deals. I wanted to talk about like the mid-major and smaller school deals that happened so far, because there is a decent amount of them, and with college football, I think it's definitely important to talk about some of these smaller schools, because some of them do find their way into the Power Four. I mean, you look at Cincinnati, like I've said many times, Cincinnati used to be in the American Athletic Conference. They're currently in the Big 12. They're a they're a Power 4 school now. I mean, that's just the way it is right now. So, yeah, looking at what these group of 5 schools are doing is important, because then we can see how they're setting themselves up for just to make that jump to the Power 4 level. Because I do think that it is slowly going to expand. It's like every like 5 to 7 years or 5 to 10 years, they add in one new school, and that's just due to conference expansion. And with the Protect College Sports Act, there is the max of 20 schools, and no conference is at a max of 20 yet, even at the Power 4 level. So that's also something to keep in mind as well, where we could see a jump into one of those conferences. Now, again, kind of going into the Protect College Sports Act a little bit, that vote did get postponed until September. They weren't able to get the vote in just yet, so that did get postponed to September. But if and when it gets passed, which it currently has the backing of all the conferences, and it has a lot of backing behind it right now. But with the rule, if a group of 5 team was to leave their conference for a Power 4 conference, they would technically have to wait 5 years before they were officially a member. So, except for, the independent schools. But I guess the only really small independent school would be UConn. But anyways, let's look at some of these other schools. Or let's look at some of these deals. So, Memphis, from the American Athletic Conference, they headlined the mid-major landscape with a 5-year, $25 million agreement with FedEx. FedEx is deeply rooted in Memphis. They already have a financial commitment to Memphis athletics, so this deal just kind of deepens those roots, strengthens them. So, we're definitely going to be seeing FedEx patches on Memphis football. I think this was definitely the most lucrative and most financial, the wealthiest deal out of the group of 5 conferences. But when you have a company like FedEx, a national brand like that, and it's considered local for you because that's where a lot of FedEx is based out of, I think, having an agreement like that is really strong. And Memphis is a school that has tried to make the jump into the Power 4 conference level, even as recent as this year. Now, we have seen that Memphis did try to make that jump into the Big 12. They made a very lucrative offer to the Big 12, and the Big 12 actually declined that offer. And I've talked about that offer on previous broadcasts as well. But Memphis is considered one of the bigger schools in the group of 5. Other deals, we've got Marshall from the Sun Belt. They secured a 5-year partnership with the Marshall Health Network. Financial terms are undisclosed, so we don't know them, but the patch will feature prominently across all primary athletic uniforms. So every sport, we're going to be seeing Marshall Health Network on all Marshall's uniforms. New Mexico State from Conference USA inked a 3-year deal with the Inn of the Mountain Gods, which is a premier resort and casino located in Mescalero, New Mexico. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about last week with Oklahoma State, where they're in a way advertising gambling and sports betting by having the patch of a casino or a resort on their uniforms. And I think that's a little bit dangerous territory, but it is local, I guess, for New Mexico State. So, yeah, I don't know. A little tricky, a little bit controversial, in my opinion. But anyways, we move on. Louisiana Monroe from the Sun Belt partnered with international Christian relief organization Samaritan's Purse, which is a unique 1-year deal valued at over $100,000. And basically with this, it's actually nonprofit. That's part of the reason why this is such a unique deal, because as of right now, this is the only nonprofit that has made a deal with any school, Power 4 or Group of 5 level. So this deal is kind of special. And then, of course, we've got Army, Air Force, and Navy. They all brokered a 5-year, $10 million uniform sponsorship with USAA. I mean, honestly, I don't necessarily think that's entirely surprising. USAA already has established roots with each of these schools, which makes sense because they primarily offer insurance for military and military families. So, not entirely surprising, but it's a partnership that already existed before, and now that partnership is just being strengthened with this patch deal. This was also one of, at least for the Group of 5, this was one of the better deals. I mean, one of the higher end deals. I mean, you can even compare it to some of the other schools that that have made deals. I mean, 10 million is, or I mean, at the Power 4 level, I mean, but yeah, I think that it's like we have to look at these patch deals with the Group of 5, just because eventually they're going to move up, whether it be becoming independent. I mean, Air Force, Army, and Navy could become independent. I mean, at one point, I believe they used to be independent. So, and just with the ever-changing landscape of college sports, they could very well become independent, especially with this deal. I mean, it's very possible, but highly unlikely at this point in time. But down the road, maybe in 10 years, they become independent. Who knows? But yeah, the college sports landscape is just always ever-changing. But with that being said, before I go into my rankings and break down the coaches poll and just really deep dive into college football, because we are about 2 weeks out from college football, I have a message from our sponsor.
This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schlyde at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com.
Okay, we're back. So, just to start off, we're going to talk about the coaches poll. And the coaches poll, as of right now, is the most updated preseason ranking that people are going off of. And ironically, it's already out of date just because of the result of a federal case in Colorado regarding eligibility, where players from the high school class of 2022 were granted a 5th year of eligibility. So there are some players that are coming back that the coaches did not know were coming back, prior to making this ranking. So we're going to keep that in mind when looking at these rankings. And it is also important to know that the AP poll has not come out with their preseason rankings yet. That is actually going to come out next week, Monday, August 17th, around noon. So we will probably be breaking that down next week and talking about how terrible the AP poll rankings are, because, well, that's just kind of a thing we do here. And that's a thing that a lot of people do, not even just me, but just in general, that's just something that a lot of us do. But with that being said, let's look at the coaches poll rankings. So, for the coaches poll, we've got at number 1, we've got Ohio State. At number 2 is Oregon. 3 is Georgia. 4 is Texas. 5 is Notre Dame. 6 is Indiana, 7 is Miami, 8 is Texas A&M, 9 Oklahoma, 10 Ole Miss, 11 Alabama, 12 Texas Tech, LSU at 13, USC at 14, BYU at 15, Michigan at 16, Penn State at 17, Tennessee at 18, Washington at 19, SMU at 20, Utah at 21, Iowa at 22, Clemson at 23, Houston at 24, and Missouri at 25. Now, I'm not entirely surprised by some of these rankings. Throughout the entire preseason and ever since, the transfer portal stuff has happened, there definitely are some teams that have some favorability, like Oregon and Texas. Those are two teams that immediately come to mind, at least, thinking of the transfer portal. Texas, I think they're very much overrated. I don't think they should be at number 4 to start out the season, but you look at last season and Texas was preseason ranked at number 1. So are we really surprised? No, not really. Not really at all. But that's just where we're at right now. I think, having Indiana and Miami both outside of the top 5, considering they were both in the national championship game, is kind of disrespectful because both of them return a lot of talent. Miami picked up Darian Mensah, who might have actually been the best quarterback in the transfer portal out of everybody. And Indiana picked up Josh Hoover, and they're also returning 2 key defensive players in Stephen Daly and Kellen Wyatt, who didn't even play in the playoffs, but were 2 of Indiana's biggest contributors in the first 5 games of the regular season. Like you look at Kellen Wyatt, he was a key pass rusher, started in the first 7 games, and then suffered a season-ending injury against Michigan State. And then Stephen Daly, he's the one who got injured after the Big Ten championship game celebrating and sustained a knee injury. But he is also coming back for a 5th year. So, again, both those guys were key factors to Indiana's defense, and now they're back. And again, I think if the coaches knew that they were coming back, I think Indiana probably would have been higher on people's lists. Now, obviously, I'm going to be a little bit higher on some teams than others just because I'm looking at this a little bit differently than the coaches are looking at it. But that's natural. The coaches have more of an on-field thing. They're going to be better than me at breaking down and analyzing the film. But I also know, I can look at year over year how different coaches make different decisions and how it can affect the outcome of certain games. Like big playoff games. You look at Virginia Tech, for example. Well, not even Virginia Tech, but just James Franklin. Let's just throw James Franklin in there, which I've noticed how I didn't call him Ben Franklin this time. Haha. But James Franklin was notorious for being the guy who couldn't win the big game. That was just kind of almost his mantra, I guess. Not necessarily one that he wanted or gave himself. I guess in a way, he did give it to himself because he wasn't able to win the big game. But he, obviously he's not going to be like, yeah, I'm big game James. I can't win the big game. But yeah. Anyway, I'm kind of going off on a rant here, but there are some other coaches that I think do kind of get a lot more credit than they deserve. You look at Steve Sarkisian from Texas, for example. What big game has he won? What big game has he won that James Franklin has not won? Because something that at least James Franklin has over Steve Sarkisian is that James Franklin has won playoff games. Now, granted, the playoff games that James Franklin won were against SMU and Boise State. But still, he still was able to come out on top in those games. Steve Sarkisian did make it to a 4-team playoff when Quinn Ewers was on the team. But due to poor decision making and the lack of a strong offensive line, Texas was not able to beat Washington to make it to the national championship game. And honestly, whenever I watch Texas play, they always, because of poor decision making throughout the game up until the last 5 minutes, Texas is always trying to come back from behind. They did it against Vanderbilt. They did win against Vanderbilt, but that's also Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was not a very deep team. They tried to do it against Ohio State at the beginning of the year last year. They weren't able to do it. Because, again, not a strong offensive line. That was a huge, huge, huge issue for them last year, which I frankly don't really think they addressed all that well in the portal. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Texas actually does this year. And they also had a young quarterback in Arch Manning, and it was his first real start in college football. And it was at Ohio State. Now, obviously, I think Ohio State versus Texas is going to be a key factor in how this year goes for not just both of those teams, but for the Big Ten and the SEC in general. I think the outcome of that game is going to be a huge defining point of the season very early on. But I think Notre Dame at 5, I think it's kind of fair, but I personally would have put them higher just because they return a lot of guys. Obviously, losing Jeremiah Love obviously hurts them a lot, but they picked up a lot of players in the transfer portal. They have a strong recruiting class coming in. They just upgraded the weight room. Like Notre Dame they are climbing up. They are progressively climbing up, and they were able to get the playoff committee to give them a special spot in the playoffs if they're in the top 12. So they were able to break the system for themselves. I mean, as much as it sucks for other teams, I guess you have to give credit where credit's due. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, they were able to throw a fit, take their ball and go home, and then get themselves almost a guaranteed playoff spot from now until the end of time. And speaking of playoffs, there was a 20-team playoff format that was brought up. Nobody's really acting on it yet, but it was something that was brought up recently that we could maybe see something like that in the future, or at least brought up in future meetings regarding the college football playoff. Just other teams that I think are a little bit overrated. I think Texas Tech at 12, a little bit overrated. I think for me, the loss of Brendan Sorsby really hurts that team. They do have a great defensive line. They have a great offensive line. They are very built on the offensive and defensive line. But with the loss of Brendan Sorsby, I'm just very much questioning how efficiently this offense is going to run this year. Because I thought Brendan Sorsby was the perfect fit out of all the quarterbacks that were in the transfer portal. I really liked the way Brendan Sorsby, his playing style and the way Texas Tech likes to play. I thought that would have been a really, really good combination, and I think Texas Tech would have gone really far this year and probably repeated as Big 12 champions. But without Brendan Sorsby, I just don't see that happening. And I also again, I'm just not very optimistic with this Texas Tech team, but there's also not a lot that I guess really can be done about it. But yeah, I think USC at 14, I think that one honestly is pretty fair because USC normally is pretty overrated by the media. They're normally pretty overrated by the media. And I feel like they're actually being rated pretty fairly. They do still have Jada Mayava, and he is an elite quarterback. I think he's a quarterback that definitely is being slept on this year. But yeah, I think Michigan at 16. I think Michigan, they're at 16, but I think they're a team that can absolutely surprise some people. But yeah, enough about the coaches poll. I'm going to look at my rankings. So again, like I said before, some of it is, paying a little bit of homage to what teams did last year, how coaches coach, just coaches that I like, coaches that I trust, and partially schedule, how I think schedules are going to pan out, and recruiting. That was the other thing. But recruiting and transfer portal. But yeah, so for my rankings, I have Indiana at 1, Notre Dame at 2, Oregon at 3, Ohio State at 4, Miami at 5, Georgia at 6, Texas at 7, BYU at 8, Oklahoma at 9, Michigan at 10, Ole Miss at 11, USC at 12, LSU at 13, Texas Tech at 14, Texas A&M at 15, Washington at 16, Penn State at 17, Alabama at 18, Arizona at 19, Iowa at 20, Georgia Tech at 21, Houston at 22, SMU at 23, Louisville at 24, and Virginia Tech at 25. So obviously, just some notable teams that I have in here that are not on the coaches poll: Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, Arizona. Just to start off with those, what was another team? I know there was like 4, but anyway, I think Louisville was the other one as well. So it was Georgia Tech, Louisville, Virginia Tech, and Arizona that were not on the coaches poll and that are on my poll, or at least my rankings. And obviously, there's definitely some flip-flopping around in the top 5. I do have Indiana and Notre Dame at the top 2. I like the coaching. I like the way both rosters are constructed. The schedules are pretty nice for both of them. I think Indiana's is a little bit tougher, but I will say Notre Dame having to go up against Miami is tough, but they are playing Miami in Notre Dame, or in South Bend, and it's going to be kind of later in the year, so it could be snowing. So I think that game is pretty favorable for Notre Dame, or at least the environment is going to be favorable for Notre Dame. They do also play BYU, and BYU is a team, I put them at 8 because they didn't really lose a lot of talent, and they had a really young team last year that had a strong argument to make the playoffs. Now, really the only person that I saw online fighting for BYU's spot was obviously the BYU fans, but also Dave Portnoy. Dave Portnoy was really the only BYU defender that I saw, at least in the sports media stratosphere. And honestly, I don't think he was that far off. I mean, when you only lose to one team twice, now granted, they were blowout losses, so and BYU had a pretty light schedule, so I guess I do see the argument of keeping them out of the playoffs. But at the same time, they had a freshman starting quarterback. He was one of like 3 freshman starting quarterbacks, and he was able to get BYU to the Pop-Tart Bowl, like borderline playoffs. Like they were borderline playoff team right there. And they're pretty much returning everybody. So I really like BYU, and I think they're their team that's definitely going to surprise some people. I put Texas at 7 for the reasons that I said before. I don't trust Steve Sarkisian. He does not play well in big games. The schedule isn't the most favorable, but not even that. They had so many close games last year against teams that it should not have been close against. They should not have played close against Kentucky or Mississippi State. Those are 2 teams that really should not have been close with the roster that Texas had. And again, due to poor decision-making and a bad offensive line, like they ended up losing one to Florida, and Florida was one of the worst teams in the SEC last year. So now, granted, I get that the Swamp is a tough place to play, but South Florida beat Florida in the Swamp. So I just don't see an argument there. I'm sorry, but I just do not trust this Texas team, and I put Georgia above Texas because ever since Sarkisian has been coaching at Texas, and ever since Texas has been in the SEC, Georgia has owned Texas every single time. They always beat them. So I'm not going to put Texas above Georgia. Oklahoma, I have them pretty high because I'm pretty high on John Mateer. Going into this year, I feel like he's put in a lot of work. I mean, you could even see the work that dude's put in. He is built now. That dude is built to the point that everybody, like including players from other teams, are like, damn. Like they're like, okay, like you put on some muscle. You're gonna like, and the throws that he's making in preseason. I mean, they look scary. And granted, like, it is also preseason, so we can take it with a grain of salt. But I think Oklahoma this year could be a team that surprises people. And I think Michigan, I have them at 10 because same reason. I think they retain a lot of their guys, but they upgrade in coaching. I think that upgrade in coaching is going to make Michigan a seriously tough team. Whittingham has taken Utah to the Pac-12 championship multiple. I mean, he's won Pac-12 championships. I think he is that guy for Michigan. I think he will be Michigan's best coach in a while, at least definitely integrity-wise, to say the least. But yeah, and I have Ole Miss at 11 because of the fact that they're returning Trinidad Chambliss and K'Wan Lacey. I don't necessarily think Ole Miss is going to finish 11th. I could see Ole Miss actually winning the SEC championship this year because of the way that Pete Golding coached in the playoffs. Now, obviously, no idea what he's going to do in the regular season. We don't know. We haven't seen him as a coach in the regular season, or at least as a head coach, per se. You know what I mean? But we have seen him coach and win big games. He went toe-to-toe with Miami in the semifinals, beat Georgia in the quarterfinals, and then, beat Tulane. But he was able to make it to the semifinals, like just on a whim, pretty much. I mean, granted, people are like, oh, it wasn't his roster, but a majority of the Ole Miss players stayed, or at least the majority of the players that he needed to stay, stayed. So I'm feeling pretty confident in this Ole Miss team. Not necessarily enough to put him in my top 10, but I do think they could finish on top of the SEC this year. USC, I have them at 12. I think USC was a team that was very much slept on last year. I mean, in Big Ten play, they struggle, and I think travel definitely has something to do with that. I still think that they are chickens for opting out of playing Notre Dame, or at least resuming the series for the next 4 years, but that's just my opinion. It's a long-standing rivalry, and it is a fun rivalry game to watch, so the fact that they chickened out of it, I think, is ridiculous, but that's just my opinion. But I think, the fact that they have Jaden Maiava, yes, they do lose Makai Lemon. That is a huge loss for USC, but Maiava, he can sling it. He can sling it, and I wouldn't be surprised if USC surprised some people. I mean, seriously, they were able to win their bowl game. If I'm not mistaken, it was against LSU. So, yeah. Speaking of LSU, I have them at 13 because, and I didn't put them in my top 12 because I don't necessarily trust Lane Kiffin. I haven't seen him win big games. We've seen him slip up in other games as well. That's another thing to keep in mind. So, just like when he goes from one team to the next, he normally does take 1 to 2 steps backwards before he takes the 4 steps forward. So my hot take is that LSU is just not going to make the playoffs this year. I don't think they will. I think they'll keep other teams in the SEC out, or at least lower in rank in the playoffs. I think they could beat teams that maybe people don't think they're going to beat, but I also believe that they're going to lose to teams that they should beat, and that will ultimately leave a lot of 2-loss or 3-loss SEC teams fighting for those last few spots in the playoffs. I've got Texas Tech at 14. It's not too far off from where the college football or the coaches had Texas Tech. I, again, just have them a little bit lower because I had that much faith in Brennan Sorsby. I really liked the Brennan Sorsby Texas Tech combination, but just him leaving so late in the preseason and all the drama surrounding it and all of that, I think that's going to have a negative effect on Texas Tech going into this season. And I mean, again, they do have a great offensive and defensive line, but I just think without Brendan Sorsby, I don't think they can compete as well against teams like LSU or USC or BYU or Oklahoma. So that's why I have them that low. Texas A&M, I have them at 15. They were a turnover machine last year. They were a schedule merchant as well. Some of the teams that they beat that were ranked really should probably not have been ranked or ranked as high as they were. So I think Texas A&M was kind of thriving off of that a little bit. But I do think that Elko's a good coach, and I do think that he'll at the very least get them to the top 15. But I just don't trust Marcel Reed, especially after the way that he played against Miami last year in Kyle Field, mind you, in Kyle Field. I put Washington at 16 because I do like the fact that they have Damon Williams. The drama with Damon Williams, I think, is a little bit interesting. At least that happened at the beginning of the year, but Washington worked really hard to keep him. So it'll be interesting to see what Washington does. Penn State, they have a pretty favorable schedule. They're basically Iowa State 2.0, so I didn't want to put them too high, but I also didn't want to put them too low necessarily. I do think that they should be ranked, but I just don't know. I just don't know about this team quite yet, even though it basically is just Iowa State 2.0. Alabama, I have them at 18 because I don't really think that they did a lot in the transfer portal, and I don't really know a lot about the quarterback that they have starting for them. And I don't know. I'm just not very confident in this Alabama team going into this year, to be quite honest. I'm just not entirely sure how they're going to do. I don't think they're going to do as well as last year. And yeah, again, I'm just not really feeling this Alabama team this year. I have Arizona at 19, partially like kind of the same thing with Indiana. They do return a key player to their offense. Their running back who rushed for 800 plus yards. He was one of the best running backs in college football. And he did 800 plus yards with about 130 carries, averaging about 8.2, 8.3 yards per carry. So I think him coming back to Arizona is huge. And Arizona is actually my dark horse to win the Big 12. Just with the Brendan Sorsby situation and having a veteran quarterback in Noah Fafita with an elite running back, I think Arizona could get it done, to be honest. Iowa, I have at 20 just because they're a consistent performer. They always have a good defense. Offense has been progressively looking better. So I think this Iowa team, has kind of earned its spot in the top 25. Georgia Tech, I have at 21. I liked what they did in the transfer portal, especially with the pickup of Alberto Mendoza. When he was playing this year in the games that he did play, not necessarily start, but he played in, he looks good and he was executing. And from what I've seen in preseason footage, he looks really good. I mean, he's slinging it. He can run. I think he's a better runner than Fernando. So I'm really liking this Georgia Tech team. Houston, I have at 22. They're a very scrappy team, and they're well coached. So I'm paying the respect there. SMU, I have at 23. They have a solid roster, pretty much same as Houston, but I think Houston is just a little bit better. I'm just a little bit more confident in Houston. 24th, I have Louisville. I like the coaching. I like Jeff Brom as a coach. He is a really good coach. The fact that he outcoached Cristobal in Miami, I think says a lot about that team. He worked with a lot less, and that defense is elite. So keep an eye on Louisville. And Virginia Tech, I have at 25th because it's basically Penn State 2.0, and they're going into an ACC conference that people consider weak. So I think Virginia Tech will definitely do pretty well. I am very curious to see how they do in those big games because, again, they do have, as people call him, Big Game James. So we'll see how it goes. But I will say not having Virginia Tech in the top 25 for the coaches poll was kind of surprising to me. I mean, we'll see what the AP poll does next week. We'll break it down. But yeah, with that being said, that is all that we have time for today. Tune in next week where we break down the AP poll, any other college sports rules and regulations updates. We will have those. And we're also going to start looking ahead to week 1 in college football as well. If you weren't able to listen to the full broadcast, you can go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Millions.co, Patreon, YouTube, and other podcasting platforms if you want to catch the parts of the broadcast that you missed. But yeah, I'm also on social media. I post on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Search up Schlyde Sports. You'll find me there. And yeah, with that being said, I hope you guys all have a great rest of your week. See you next week. Schlyde out.